Welcome, everyone, to Breaking News with Breakaway USA, your pivotal source for the most compelling and urgent news stories of the week. I'm your host, Fabian Garcia, and alongside me is my co-host, David Kate. And each week, we dive deep into the heart of news that matters, bringing you detailed rundown, critical analysis, and our unique perspectives on what's shaping our world. Today, we are tackling topics that everyone is talking about. Specifically, the Supreme Court has ruled that Idaho can institute a ban on puberty blockers on children. We also have Donald Trump, who is being kept prison in a courtroom. And Israel and Saudi Arabia seem to have created an allyship. So we're going to talk about that today. How are you, David?
I'm doing great, and I'm just super excited to talk about all these crazy events that are happening and different topics that haven't happened in the last few days here and today, honestly.
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting weekend, and I was in Vegas for UFC 300, and I got back, and while I was in the stadium watching the UFC fights, Iran attacked Israel, and I'm like, what is happening? And I was trying to focus on the fight, but I saw the Iron Dome intercepting missiles. I saw all these things happen, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening. Iran attacked Israel, so that was very eye opening, and now we're seeing everything that's resulted since then.
It is really eye-opening, and it's really shocking because it is the first time that you've had Iran actually launch stuff from within its own country, not from its proxies. So, it's kind of like one of these surreal moments that you know where you were when this happened, essentially. And one thing I got to add there is that it wasn't just the Iron Dome technology being used, but it was this thing called the David Sling technology.
That's right.
Yep. And then also some American Patriot batteries, because in order to take down these huge missiles that they're sending, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, they had to implement some crazy technology. So, baby, and I couldn't imagine sitting there at UFC 300 watching that sweet knockout or getting ready to see that, while Iran was, essentially doing that.
I was in a dilemma because we were there for 8 hours from 3 p.m. The first fight had an ex-UFC champion, so I wanted to see it. So I had to make sure my battery lasted the entire time. I had one recharge in my external battery, and the news was coming up. So of course I'm scrolling Twitter, and I was just making sure that I could get everything up while still having a battery left over. So that's what I was dealing with on Saturday.
Well, that sounds fun. That sounds fun. Something, when such news is breaking out, but you're at such an incredible event, like, what do you do?
Yeah. Now, Trump today, this is breaking news. This happened maybe an hour ago or so. And I don't know if you've seen this, but Trump is now on trial, a criminal case in New York for Stormy Daniels' hush money. Now, considering the fact that Stormy Daniels Trump posted a letter that Stormy Daniels wrote back in 2018 saying that nothing happened. He is now, as of Colin Rugg's post, let me just read what he says. It says, Donald Trump confirms that New York Judge Juan Merchan said he won't be able to attend his son Barron Trump's graduation. Trump also said the judge won't let him attend a hearing before the Supreme Court, which is happening next week. And this case is about Trump's immunity. It's a political witch hunt. We're not going to be given a fair trial, Trump said. It's perfect for the radical left Democrats. Actually, let's just go ahead and play what he said. There's a video just there below. That video there.
So thank you very much. We had some amazing things happen today. As you know, my son is graduating from high school, and it looks like the judge will not let me go to the graduation of my son, who's worked very, very hard. He's a great student. I'm very proud of the fact that he did so well. I was looking forward for years to have graduation with his mother and father there. And it looks like the judge isn't going to allow me to escape this scam. It's a scam trial. If you read all of the legal pundits, all of the legal scholars today, there's not one that I see that said this is a case that should be brought or tried. It's a scam. It's a political witch hunt. It continues, and it continues forever. And we're not going to be given a fair trial. It's a very, very sad thing. In addition, as you know, next Thursday, we're before the United States Supreme Court on a very big hearing on immunity And this is something that we've been waiting for a long time. And the judge, of course, is not going to allow us. He's a very conflicted judge, and he's not going to allow us to go to that. He won't allow me to leave here for a half a day, go to D.C. and go before the United States Supreme Court because he thinks he's superior, I guess, to the Supreme Court. We got a real problem with this judge. We have a real problem with a lot of things having to do with this trial, including the DA, because you go right outside and people are being mugged and killed all day long, and he's sitting here all day with about 10 or 12 prosecutors over nothing. Over nothing. Over what people say shouldn't be a trial. So I just want to thank you very much. But that I can't go to my son's graduation, or that I can't go to the United States Supreme Court, that I'm not in Georgia or Florida or North Carolina campaigning like I should be. It's perfect for the radical left Democrats. That's exactly what they want. This is about election interference. That's all it's about. Thank you very much.
Wow.
That is wild.
It is wild. It is
Yeah.
wild. My initial thoughts about this is that we've seen Trump in and out of court for months now, and they've really made the entire campaign essentially about him having this one court date after another. He's being in one trial, he's being in another trial, different state every other week and whatnot. And I remember when they were making the timeline in between the debates while the Republican debates were going on, and how they were saying they'll interfere in his ability to look at him. He's looking more presidential than he ever has, I believe personally. And he's actually humble because he understands the situation there. You have a current president and administration who are using all the institutions to essentially go after their political opposition. And it goes from the people all the way up to the top to President Trump. And him being in court is a perfect representation of that. Hush money, that's essentially what he's in court over. And I'm not sure, I kind of split both ways, whether this is good for Democrats or bad for Democrats, because I wonder what the optics look like for independent voters when they see Trump in court, essentially. Do they feel some type of grievance to that, or are they actually pretty disturbed about the fact that this is a political candidate? The other idea about this is that perhaps this is actually bad for Democrats, because perhaps independents are realizing that the institutions today are fully corrupted. I'm actually in favor of the style of institutions that we have. I think the FBI, for example, is a good idea. But the current way that the FBI runs with the current people that are in there is very, very corrupt. So I feel like they see that. What do you think, Fabian?
I think that they are continuing their strategy of overplaying their hand, of trying to prove to their extremist base that they are doing something. And that is going to cause a lot of people, including a lot of just regular independent or middle of the road voters, who are seeing that this is a clear election interference to stop the leading presidential candidate from campaigning for president by subjecting them to a prison sentence inside of the courtroom. He literally said, if you do not attend court, you go to jail. Now, this court case can be strung out as long as they like. That means that Trump can no longer go to places like UFC, right, where he gets a standing, a raucous crowd and a standing ovation that gets him more popular and popular as every time he goes. This means that he can't hold campaign rallies unless he does those rallies around the times that the judge determines that court is going to be open. That means that he can't go to his son's graduation. That means that he can't go to the Supreme Court where there's a case about him, about his immunity. He can't go to that. And I like how Trump put it, because he believes that he is superior. This judge believes he's superior to the Supreme Court, that he's not allowing this to do it. This is all going to blow back in the Democrats' face. And I think that they've already concocted this plan a long time ago. They used the first case as a testing ground. And then this next case with this very corrupt DA from Georgia and Fannie Willis, they learn from their mistakes, and they know what they did right and what they did wrong. And now it's just snowballing. So you have to think to yourself, this guy is not even allowed to not be in court when he's running for president. Like, come on, this is just absolutely ridiculousness at this point.
It is ridiculous. And Fabian, I just want to ask you also, if you were a Democrat strategist, if you said that they're overplaying their hand, do you actually believe that this is part of their strategy, that they actually believe that by prosecuting a former president and your current political opponent in the future election is actually a smart strategy, or are they just completely dumb, intellectually lazy? I mean, what do you think?
I think it's gone to the point where, and this happens a lot with groupthink, where you have these strategists in the office who the last thing that you can say is, hey guys, we might not want to do this because we might lose. You don't get paid. If you're a strategist and the entire train is steaming towards get Trump, get Trump, get Trump, there's no one that's going to be in those meetings that's going to be the voice of reason and say, guys, it's really not working, because you're in such a bubble. The algorithm you watch on Twitter is not showing you the other side. You have strategists who aren't really strategizing. They're just they're just advancing the narrative that they're being fed by all the people in power that they're around. They're in a tiny little bubble. People on the outside looking in are like, what in the hell's going on? But it's just like anything else. If you live in an echo chamber, you don't have a good idea of what's happening on the outside of that echo chamber. And that's honestly what I believe is happening, because nothing makes sense why they keep pushing, not just this Trump thing, but the trans thing and all this. Like, who are you pandering to? You already have their vote. So why do you keep doing more of what you're already doing? Doesn't make any sense to me.
To solidify the base that they're losing on a daily basis. And for example, while we're talking about the persecution of your political opposition, just the fact that you had that mugshot of President Trump, former President Trump, is enough for a lot of individuals to feel some sort of resentment when it comes down to the judicial system. So they're losing individuals on a crazy level. Seriously. I mean, they're losing Black vote, Latino vote, the younger vote in such numbers that they have to solidify their most radical and most extreme bases, which are the alphabet soup people. I have a, sorry about my alarm going off there, but here's my whole idea about, or my perspective on when it comes down to the political persecution that we're seeing with Trump. I think that they're not actually overplaying their hand, because this isn't part of their strategy in the first place. I believe that they're actually trying to stop everything from these radical DAs, judges doing this unprecedented attack on their political opposition, because there's no way a single Democrat strategist is sitting there in the Oval Office or in these big multi-million-dollar super PAC meetings and is sitting there and saying, hey, we need to make sure that the DA in Atlanta pushes this case. We need to make sure that the DA in New York pushes this case, and the judge does this and whatnot, because every time this happens, it actually takes away from anything that Biden does in a good case. So I don't think that Democrats are sitting there and pushing for this, but hey, Democrats are crazy, so we never know.
Yeah. Well, I think they see this as, if we stop him from campaigning, then he literally cannot campaign. That's essentially shutting him up, because if he can't comment on things that are happening because he's in court all day, you won't ever see Trump. Only when he leaves. What, he's going to have campaign rallies at night? I mean, and who's going to go to those things? So everybody. Well, that would be something. That'd be something, because everything they try just doesn't work. And yeah, I mean, they're really playing with fire here, because if Democrats lose, which I believe that they will, I know they will legitimately lose, right? And you always have to think they're going to rig, let's say 3% of the election or so. That's why I like how Trump says, make it too big to rig. One of the best campaign slogans I've heard in quite a while. So I think they're playing with fire at this level, especially. I don't know what else they can do to stop them other than, I mean, this is the craziest thing I've seen.
I agree with you. The one thing I will say is that perhaps it's they do want him to campaign, because every time he campaigns, the media is able to take it out of complete context, some part of it, and then run with it for a week. I mean, we saw the bloodbath hoax, right? So, yeah. But Fabian, I think we're both onto something here when it comes to why they're going after the political opposition.
Yeah. So we're gonna we have a special guest who's gonna come on, Seek Smith, who's gonna give us a quick update on Kaylee's Law, and we're gonna go to a quick commercial, and then we'll be right back with Seek Smith.
With the one and only.
Blah, 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 blah. What are you talking about? Here, have some Freedom 2.0. Now, the Constitution is awesome. That's 1A.
And shout out to our sponsor, Freedom Water. Check them out, freedom20.com / breakaway for 15% off. But we have in the studio today a very special person, the pit bull of pit bulls, the people everyone is scared of on the left, the one and only Mom Army founder and Badass Do-Gooders founder, Seek Smith. Welcome, Seek.
Thank you, guys. I'm happy to be on.
Welcome to the show, Seek.
So, Seek, you are the person who I know that has their ear most to the ground when it comes to the activism that's happening around the country. You're all over the place. I think you have a trip tomorrow. You're always traveling, so you have your ear to the ground. And I'd love to hear some of the updates that have been happening and what's happening.
Yeah, well, the latest update was last time we talked, I was in DC. So that was for a small coalition group that I'm part of with Kelly Walker, who's spearheading the efforts there. He was one of the first parents to be arrested at a school board meeting way back when, and all sorts of horrible things that he's been targeted for. So he's been getting different congressional office in DC to look into the issue of parents being targeted for speaking up. And so we got some traction, was able to go to DC and have a meeting with being led by Jim Jordan's office, Eli Crane, Congressman Andy Biggs, and then Congressman Andy Ogles out of Tennessee. So they're all interested in digging deeper and investigating parents who are being targeted. So I came with testimonies from different parents across the country who have been targeted, docs, license plate docs, addresses on social media, under investigation with the military. I mean, I can go on and on with the atrocities that's happening. I mean, people need to understand that our government is weaponizing the Justice Department, the DOJ, because of the Patriot Act, right? They recently, a couple years ago, Merrick Garland, for those that remember, in a memo that was put out, deeming parents as domestic terrorists. They rescinded that. They started to backtrack on that, but still parents are being treated like domestic terrorists. So there's some traction there. They're really interested in pursuing that. And even we're even drafting a bill to try and remedy the problems with government targeting parents with our lawyer partner, Ryan Heath, who runs the Gavel Project. So there's that update, and I will have more for everyone as things progress, and hopefully we can even push for a congressional hearing and have parents who've been targeted testify at the hearing. So that's one update. The latest update, too, is specific to California. Tomorrow there is a big hearing in the Public Safety Committee tomorrow morning. If anyone's in the Sacramento area, I highly, advise you to find time to show up for this. Two really big bills are coming in front of that committee for a vote. One is AB 1931, which is actually Kaylee's Law. Kaylee's Law is a really good friend. She is on our Mom Army Advisory Council. The law was passed in Arizona in 2022, the first of its kind, to give a lifetime injunction against the perpetrator. So victims and survivors can have a sigh of relief and be protected for the lifetime of the perpetrator, so that you don't have to keep facing your perpetrator every time in court to ask for an extension on a restraining order or an injunction. This takes care of it for life.
Yeah, can you explain how that works? Because I didn't know about this until you told me, and it's really bizarre that this hasn't already been a law.
No.
Wow.
So across the country, victims and survivors have to go back to court. Sometimes every year. I've heard some horrible cases. It could be every 3 years, because mostly a restraining order, you might get it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. They're really not that long. In her law, it's specific. At the time of sentencing, you can enact Kaylee's Law and request for the injunction at the time of sentencing for a lifetime injunction. So it changes the game for survivors. I mean, I hear stories of survivors and having their perpetrator get out of jail and live across the street from them. I just got a message today about that. And so these type of crimes that are, very violent against a victim, sexual abuse, trafficking, even domestic violence cases. I had a friend post today about her best friend who had been killed in a domestic violence situation 10 years ago. So someone like her can enact this law and have that protection. So it's been passed in Arizona, passed in Wisconsin in 2022, now being introduced in California for this legislative session, as well as Missouri. So for California, it's go time. We need all hands on deck. We've been rallying people to call that committee, members of that committee all day today to ask them to support this bill. There's little things that people can do. You don't have to show up at the Capitol. You can make phone calls, you can email, you can, post on social media and share. So those type of actions are really important to push this across the finish line. The Democrats are already, slamming the bill, saying it's cruel and unusual punishment. So, God
Very
forbid
progressive.
I know, right? God forbid that perpetrators don't have access to their victims after they're convicted and sentenced. So this is conviction. We're not talking about accusation. We're talking about someone who's been sentenced and convicted and going to jail for their crimes. So please, and our goal with Mom Army, we've been working with Kaylee, is to connect her with different legislators, get different sponsors in different states. And our goal is to pass Kaylee's law across all 50 states. So we're excited that it's being introduced in California and Missouri.
That's amazing, Seek.
Yeah.
Seek, I have a quick question I want to ask you about the first update that you gave us. What would you say is the appropriate type of legislation, whether on a state level or federal legislation, that you would like to see happen when it comes down to protecting the speech of parents when they go to these school board meetings and whatnot?
Yeah. So the language for the bill that's being drafted, it's possible, but it's also very tough, and we're introducing this at the federal level, which makes it even more difficult to pass. That's why a lot of bills go state by state, but it's basically to personally sue a government official who is who is violating someone's constitutional rights, their free speech rights, so any of those protections that is under the Constitution, that if an official is abusing their power and going and weaponizing their position that they sit in to go after citizens of this country, that's really the goal of this bill. I don't know how far it's going to go, but we're going to try. That's the least we could do, is to hold government officials personally. They shouldn't have this immunity when they're abusing their power and violating people's constitutional rights.
Yeah, and I could see that actually extending to whistleblowers as well, that are coming out against the government and government officials using their power, and journalists and everything like that. Great stuff, Steve.
Yeah, we could, it can be broadened, but specifically because of what was happening to a lot of parents in our groups who are being, who've been arrested, fined, under investigation, losing their jobs, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of, social ramifications, and their reputations. So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted on that. If that gets any traction, we would obviously need everyone to help, get people to support this bill.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipeline that I think is going to be good. A lot of things that you're working with, and people who you are endorsing, and laws that you're endorsing, because I feel like the next wave of laws that are being passed or that are being pushed by people into space that are in the conservative movement, or just really just regular Americans who like common sense law, I think it's going to do a lot of good. We already see a lot of these laws that are stopping the mutilation of children, like a story that we're going to talk to it, about in a bit, where the Supreme Court said Iowa can ban puberty blockers and all these nasty things that they were doing to children. So I feel like these laws that are being passed are going to bring some semblance of normalcy back to America, which we kind of lost the last few years.
Yeah, I think what people have to understand too is laws are so specific, and if the language isn't in there, we're all wondering, like, how could this be happening? Like, this gender ideology is actually a new thing that is targeting children, right? So there are no laws in the books identifying this behavior as child abuse, right? So that's one way to remedy this, is we have to when it comes to child abuse, it's neglect, it's extreme neglect, it's, physical abuse, sexual abuse. There are very specific language that falls under child abuse, right? Gender ideology or taking your child to put them on puberty blockers currently is not considered child abuse. And so that's why we have to understand why the laws aren't catching up with what's actually going on. And that's why we need to draft this type of language and remedy and be so specific in the bills. Because even with Kaylee's law, what I've learned in this process and being her friend is that she originally introduced a bill for lifetime injunction. Well, guess what? One state maybe 10 years is a lifetime injunction. That's how it's defined. Another state might be 15 years. Another state might be 12. What she did was inserted the language natural lifetime. That means until they die, until the person perishes. Yeah, so you have to be very specific in how the bill is being drafted.
Wow, that's sad that it has to be that specific, because there was just a regular human decency, right? Like you don't do things to kids. It was more of like, right,
a social contract
or a social contract. Yeah. And now you have these people who have perverted what reality should be as far as having any sense of normalcy. And we're having to make laws because these perverts and these groomers are just doing things that is just so out of bounds of what is normal that we have to say no.
Yeah. And, I just spoke recently at the Peoria School Board meeting last Thursday because there was a recent arrest here in Arizona he's actually considered the Phoenix Suns superfan. He's called Mr. Orange. He was arrested for soliciting high school boys for indecent photos and images for money, in exchange for money. And so there was an investigation. They arrested him. They're charging him with these crimes. But even Kaylee said, even though he did this, probably he'll be off on probation because technically there weren't any victims. Do you know what I mean? Like no one was really harmed by him soliciting this because these kids hopefully were smart enough not to give him the photos or anything compromising. And then a teacher tipped him off about the investigation. So now that teacher's in trouble and she's been arrested and being charged for impeding an investigation. I spoke at the school board meeting. People are starting to share that video of my testimony. And what I was saying is that predators and pedophiles go where they can have access to children. So if we're wondering, there's a rash of arrests across the country, literally 2 or 3 arrests a day of stories coming out of teachers specifically who are sexually abusing students. And I was addressing that at the school board meeting, saying this is the real pandemic. This is this is the crisis our children are facing. And if we don't do better to safeguard children in public schools, at daycare centers, at the YMCA, or in the Boy Scout, anywhere where children are coalescing, predators will get a job there because that is how they operate. And then they teach each other and they have manuals to let each other know what's the best way to groom a child in these settings.
You believe that?
I can't do this. I can't.
That's crazy. See, before we get out of here, I know you got to go soon, but I would like to show you this, and I saw this yesterday, and I couldn't really believe it. I'm like, what in the hell is this? Apparently, in California, if you purchase a kid for like
trafficking,
it's not a felony. So let me just read this quick and I'll play the video. It says in California, if someone purchases a child for sex, it carries a maximum of 1 year in jail. It's only a misdemeanor. Bills to raise penalties to a felony were blocked multiple times since 2014. So I want to play this really quick and get your thoughts on it because it's just, I can't believe this is real.
Lived experienced experts were saying, you got to go after the buyer. It's just a misdemeanor. And I thought, there is no way if you buy, I thought they were mistaken.
Opponents of this measure include several criminal justice reform groups, including the Californians for Safety and Justice, Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and the California Public Defenders Association. That association, in its opposition, has said that current law already addresses the issue. It also said, in part, this bill punishes some defendants more harshly, felony punishment and sex offender registration, even when those persons do not have the intent to have sex with a minor. Similar proposals have been blocked at the state capitol since 2014, according to legislative documents. We'll see what happens with this version of the bill when it has its first hearing next week.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that's tomorrow in the Public Safety Committee as well, along with Kaylee's Law.
Oh, wow.
They're going to have a hearing on SB 1414. So last legislative session, SB 14 passed. It failed at first. So Shannon Grove, we actually worked very close with her office. They reached out to us last year for a letter of support from Mom Army for SB 14, and we submitted that. So if you actually go on her website, you'll see that we're one of the organizations that support that bill. And they killed it. Democrats killed it throughout the different committees and even on the floor on the general vote. What changed was there was a big outcry across the country on social media. Everybody, all of us, was starting to post going, what the hell is wrong with California? How could they not see that, trafficking of a child should be a felony, not a misdemeanor? And then Gavin Newsom came out and publicly stated, when the bill gets to his desk, he will sign it into law. So even the governor, who's very, liberal and progressive, went against his Democratic legislators and said he would sign it. So it went through another round of voting and it passed the second go around, and then he signed it. So this legislative session is an amendment or an extension to SB 14. It's now Bill SB 1414. It's making the buyers, not the sellers. So now we're addressing the buyer side of it, that the Johns and the people purchasing children for this violence against them, sexually violating them, now that it will be a felony for buyers.
Interesting. So as you mentioned earlier, the law has to be so specific that earlier it was just for people selling, but the people who were buying it were getting off scot-free almost.
Yeah. And they're doing that here in Arizona too. We actually have a ballot initiative. So instead of it being, because here's what you run into. You can, when you have such a slim majority here in Arizona, it's a very slim Republican majority. A lot of Democrats do not want to put more people in jail. We've been at hearings where Democrats have said to our faces that they don't want to put more people in jail. And what that means is they will, here we have a Democratic governor. She will veto the bill. So to circumvent that, Arizona is putting it as a ballot initiative. So we have lifetime imprisonment for traffickers, for traffickers and buyers of child trafficking. And it's going to the public for a vote in November. We're gathering signatures now. 90% public support for that ballot initiative.
Wow.
So that's how you get around it. If you know it's going to get killed and get vetoed at the governor's desk, you want to get around it by doing a ballot initiative, which is what California is doing with Protect Kids California. They're doing a ballot initiative to get around a very deep blue liberal, legislative body that's going to kill these bills.
Wow. It's good to know. And without activism like yours, we wouldn't know. So we appreciate it.
I'm happy to share, thank you guys for talking about these issues and, and getting and letting me, have your platform to share. I'm learning as I'm going. And in all honesty, if you asked me 2 years ago, I wasn't doing any of this policy work. It literally was something that I was thrusted into, given some of the people that I work with and my connections and that sort of thing. And so it's all new to me, but I'm learning as I'm going, and I'm starting to understand the intricacies of lawmaking.
You know what? You're going to become an even scarier person, because not only do you organize, but now you're getting into the nitty gritty of how to pass laws. See, you're going to be the left's biggest, the boogeyman to the left, and I'm here for it. I'm
not backing down, and I'm not backing down. So that's one thing I can promise. I'm not tucking my tail and running. So, and I have fierce warriors around me. I may have such an amazing team and supporters and allies in this fight. So we're here to protect children. This is the hill we're going to die on.
Wow.
We love it.
Incredible. Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us
the update.
You guys. And please come on next time whenever
Anytime.
you have any more. And we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Fabian, that was something, huh?
That was eye-opening. Every time I talk to Seek, it's you learn some stuff there's so much good work being done all around the country by people who really care which is really nice to hear.
And it shows that grassroots really does work. It just takes hard work and patience, I would say, and a lot of organization. And if I feel like that's one thing that us as Republicans we lack is how organized the left is. I'd love to see the right being organized. And every time I talk to people like Seek, it just gives me more faith in what's happening. So
Yeah,
definitely glad.
Yeah, I mean, we each have what we do, what we do well. She does that extremely well. You and I report things, give our assessment of it, and find people who are doing things to come and spread the news to more people. Like Seek just got that word out. So that's incredible. And yeah, Kelly's Law, I mean, I can't believe that that's not something that's already a law, right? These
I
common
know.
sense things that we're like, well, and it makes sense. How are they getting away with it? Well, there's no law specifically saying that if you buy a kid to have sex with him or her, then it's a felony. Like how does it have to be something that is a law? Anyway, that's stupidity to me.
We
Yeah.
could honestly talk about this for hours about
Yeah.
how it's absurd, but
Yeah.
we'll just go forward.
Something big just happened yesterday or today, I think. It was announced that Israel helped Saudi Arabia helped Israel deflect the drones and the missiles that were shot by Iran. And this is pretty interesting. And I just found out about this because it was released online. But do you have any insight into this before we get into the article?
I don't have any direct insight into it, but one thing I just want to point out is this incredible coalition that, regardless of what all of the proxies of Iran are trying to accomplish, that they're not able to destroy this coalition that's innovatively going to one day happen. And what I'm talking about is the West becoming great allies with Arab states, especially Gulf states and whatnot. And you'll see this coalition being built of what they call the axis of evil. I call them the axis of evil versus the West. So to see Saudi Arabia actually depart from its Arab world and join the forces of with us, essentially, with the freedom and everything, is incredible to see. So when I saw this, I was just very, very happy because we know a lot of the relations that were supposed to happen between Israel and Saudi Arabia essentially fell apart after October 7th. So I'm glad to see that at least they're trying to isolate Iran on its own in this Middle East conflict that's happening.
Yeah, and so if you haven't been keeping up with this, because there's so many things happening in the world, Trump passed something called the Abraham Accords, and it was pretty incredible. It was this massive, basically a peace deal with a bunch of countries, and word on the street is that Saudi Arabia was going to recognize Israel as a state very, very soon until the October 7th stuff happened, and then people were telling Saudi Arabia condemn Israel, and they basically said no. I don't know if later on they said a little bit of kind of a maybe no, but maybe we'll condemn them. But it's interesting that now they helped Israel shoot down these. That's a big statement that was made without making a formal statement, if that makes sense.
It absolutely is, because again, it shows that it's not Jewish versus Muslim. It's none of that. It's actually individuals that want to have a prosperous nation with prosperous people enjoying everything that the nation is providing to them, versus a bunch of Islamic fundamentalists at the end of the day. And Saudi Arabia is not with that. They're secular. They understand trade. They understand the benefits that they have when they actually open up the market and enjoy all the different various countries and whatnot, which Iran doesn't seem to understand because they put their religious ideology in the forefront of everything.
Yeah, there's an interesting concept here of the more money a country has, the more prosperity it has, the more peaceful it is, right? And it's not to say that countries like Iran and other places haven't been used by other companies or globalists or whatever it is that's sucking up all their commodities and leaving them poor, like has happened in Africa, right? It was sadly, and everyone's to blame for that. No one's under the microscope. Everyone has blame, but to see Saudi Arabia, a country that has changed so much in the last even 10 years, they had a horrible human rights record. I mean, they were, and I don't know what they're doing now, but I know they're not perfect. But there is progress to be made. And since the new king, or rather the new prince, has come into power. He's a lot younger. He has a lot of more ideas to make Saudi Arabia like Dubai, because Dubai was a testing case to say, guys, if we just make a regular country and we're not trying to be, Sharia law or Sharia law, whatever, then people are going to come here and spend money and good things are going to happen. And then you don't end up like Iran, which was really free until the Ayatollah came into power in, I believe, the 60s, and they had the Shah come into power, and then things have been so downhill from there. But there is a story that I want to get to about this specific situation that happened. And it says Saudi Arabia says it helped defend Israel against Iran. And if you go down a little bit, so this is it says Saudi Arabia acknowledged that it had helped the newly forged regional military coalition. Oh, I didn't know that this is interesting. It's a newly forged regional military coalition. I didn't know it was so proper already.
Mm-hmm.
Israel, the US, Jordan, and the UK and France repel an Iranian attack against the Jewish state early Sunday morning. The story spoke of Saudi involvement in the military defensive operation, in which 99% of the drones and missiles were destroyed before hitting their targets. Many of the drones and missiles had to travel over Jordanian and Saudi airspace to reach Israel. That's interesting.
Wow. Yeah. So one key thing to understand here is that it wasn't just Saudi Arabia essentially helping them deflect this stuff. It was United States, Israel, France, I believe in some cases. They're actually entering Jordanian airspaces. They're entering, I believe, a couple other Arab countries' airspaces. And these countries were allowing them to enter the airspace in order to take down Iranian missiles and drones that were coming to attack Israel, which just reinstates what I've been saying all along. It's not Arabs versus Jews, or Muslims versus Jews, or Israel versus Arab world, or anything like that. It's simple. It's a bunch of people that have no desire at all to see Israel exist. They don't want to see Jews exist, and they will do anything to ensure that happens. And that's countries like Jordan, countries like Saudi Arabia don't get down with that anymore. That isn't in their current society anymore, and what they want to do. Because like you were just saying, Fabian, as more prosperous the country is, or as more rich the country is, as more prosperous is. Well, all these countries sit on a bunch of resources, so it doesn't stop them from becoming prosperous. It's just, what are they going to do with this prosperity? Are they going to give it to the people so they have a very, very good society and a good social contract with the public? Or are they going to dangle that over the entire society and scream religious ideology on top of everything and let that be the forefront of things? That's what we're witnessing here.
You know what's sad is the majority of Iranian people are super cool, like super chill, secular, just not secular, but they're not a revolutionary. They're not this ultra religious. They're just regular people. One of my best friends is Iranian, and he's like, dude, no one likes the Shah. There's just these ridiculous people who are in power and ruining everything for everybody. Because when you look at the way Iran was back in the 60s, I mean, there was literally girls in bikinis on the beach, which is crazy, right? Now they got to wear the hijab and all that stuff, and it really changed. And it was the people in power that kind of forced everyone else to do these things, because they don't have the rights like we have here in the US to fight back. They say do it, you do it, or you're in prison. So it's just sad what the Ayatollah and his gremlins have done to Iran. Such a great country. I mean, it's one of the first civilizations in the entire world. A lot of people don't know that. They have historical sites. It's a beautiful place. It has so much history and culture and knowledge. And then these people just ruin all that because of whatever happened in their childhood that made them all do this. But I really hope the people of Iran, and they have stood up many times. They have fought the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and I hope that things go well for them, and this Ayatollah just kind of expires soon.
Just to quickly touch up on this, when you were talking about the uprise movements that are constantly happening in Iran, you're absolutely right. The populace itself does not like the regime. I'm sure there is a population of the populace that actually enjoys this regime and wants everything that it wants, but a majority of it doesn't want it, which is why you constantly see these small uprises. In some cases, they're pretty big, like we saw one about a year ago. But the main thing here to consider is Iran actually gave a warning to all of the West, including Israel, who they're going to attack, that they're going to attack them for 2 weeks. So it makes you think, okay, well, perhaps what they were doing isn't necessarily trying to attack Israel and take out as much as they can. What they were actually trying to do is perhaps suppress any sort of uprises from happening again. Because if the people themselves can see Iran weak, especially on an international stage, then they're more likely to have these uprises to happen against them, right? Launching missiles unprecedented from their country, like to Israel, I think that kind of dies down any uprise movements, and it at least puts the country in some sort of position to enact certain things like we've seen in Russia, for example. You can't protest the regime. They'll put you in jail. Yeah. So, those are some things to consider when we're talking about the attack and just overall everything that's happening in the region.
Yeah, I have the utmost respect for people who protest in Iran, because it's not like, and in Russia too, but specifically Iran, I want to talk about, because what they're facing is not a slap on the wrist, a fine, a night in jail like people here, or they don't even arrest protesters anymore. They're literally facing death and life in prison to protest. So to protest like that, and this has happened across time, when people protest a very draconian government, like, in Pol Pot's Cambodia or Mao's China, or those people, like, man, I have the utmost respect for someone who's going to risk everything just to protest their own government. Now, they're not being killed. So, like, these Gaza protesters, I'm sure some mean well, they're just confused, but I mean, they're doing things like sitting in front of cars. They're doing things like, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's at a completely different level. But anyway, people of Iran, man, I really hope that you guys figure everything out soon. And the CIA is in there trying to start the revolution too. So they're 100% in there.
Well, perhaps this is a revolution that I would support if the CIA is trying to somehow get going, because I don't think that there's like they always talk about Putin's regime, for example, to put Putin's regime down and so a new regime can come in power. We don't know what that would actually look like. But with Iran, I think the only solution is to collapse this regime, like a regime replacement, essentially. That should be America's foreign policy stance when it comes to Iran, which is it's calling for a lot. I understand what regime change means and what it leads to. But again, there's a difference between regime change in Russia, for example, and in Iran. So...
Absolutely. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about something that I think is very good news today. And that's the Supreme Court rules that Idaho can enforce a ban on puberty blockers and other stuff. So we're going to get to that, baby, right after this commercial. So before we go into our discussion, I do want to take a moment to shout out our sponsor, Freedom Water. Freedom Water, it's not just really good water. It also aligns with what we stand for, which is the freedom to think, speak, and act freely. And that's why we're thrilled to have them as our sponsor. And they're not just another water company. They're a movement that's unapologetically fighting for freedom of speech and ensuring we stay hydrated with really some of the purest water out there. They have this really cool, unique filtration process where they do reverse osmosis. Then they have something called O3 ozonated infusion, and then ultraviolet water filtration, which makes it taste really good and takes out all the purities without the need for unnecessary chemicals. So instead of your money, now when you buy stuff from them, which you should, because there's a code Breakaway that gives you 15% off. You know that your money's not going to go to places that are going to pay for sex changes for kids, like when you buy other companies, Target and Dasani products. Freedom 2.0 actually helps creators like us create more content for you. So please support them and opt for a healthier hydration choice that's beyond just quenching your thirst. Make sure you check them out at freedom20.com and use the code Breakaway for 15% off your order. And you know what else happened today that's refreshing is the Supreme Court just allowed Idaho to enact their block on puberty blockers on children. So that's really good news.
That is incredible. And there's a couple things about puberty blockers. The first thing is that obviously puberty blockers nowadays are being used to do what? Sex change. So, and especially when it comes, this is targeting kids, right? And one thing that you've probably heard in the last 6 months to a year, I feel like it's been a campaign initiated by something behind the scenes, but I just kept hearing nonstop that individuals who take puberty blockers are 100% satisfied after a year or 2 years. And first of all, anytime, Fabian, that you hear anything that's 100%, I feel like you got to be a little bit skeptical, right?
Yeah, it's called buyer beware in marketing.
Exactly. Got to be aware. But you got to be aware even more in the fact that these puberty blockers, these studies that they're citing, saying that, look at this study, it says 100% of people are satisfied after they take the puberty blockers. These studies are actually funded by the same pharmaceutical companies that own those puberty blockers, which is just absolutely absurd. But it just shows you how big pharma works with its marketing and whatnot. So I'm really happy to see that states are finally taking a stand, not against like something that impacts you in a public place, because I believe that's important, but you got to get down to the root problem. And if you can ban this from ever happening in the first place, then you won't have to worry about a 21-year-old dude all of a sudden competing against women in swimming and whatnot.
Yeah, and here's the even better part. It's not just puberty blockers, but it's also hormones and mastectomies for children. If you could pull that up, that tweet production. So it says, the U.S. Supreme Court rules that Idaho can enforce a ban on puberty blockers, hormones, and mastectomies for children. Under the new law, doctors and healthcare providers can face up to 10 years in prison. That's incredible. And then we also have an article from NBC News that kind of goes into a little bit more detail on this, because I was like, hold on, what happened? And apparently this is already passed, but there was because it got challenged, it went to the Supreme Court. They paused that law from being enacted until they ruled today. So if you can go down and read a little bit about what happened. So it says a divided Supreme Court on Monday allowed Idaho to mostly enforce a law that bans gender-affirming healthcare. I hate that they're still calling it this, but this is NBC News. So granting an emergency request filed by Idaho officials, the court said the law enacted last year can go into effect statewide. The court's 3 liberal judges, naturally, objected to the decision, saying the law should have remained blocked in full. And if we go down a little bit more, U.S. let me just go to the good part. It says officials subsequently turned to the Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, saying the injunction was too broad and that the law should only be blocked for the 2 plaintiffs in a lawsuit. What's funny is they brought this person up, I guess, to testify, and said that they got these puberty blockers and that they were doing completely fine. And would you believe it that one of the dissenting judges was Ketanji Brown Jackson, the lady who doesn't know what a woman is? And if we scroll down a little more, just one paragraph, Liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said the case presents numerous reasons for exercising restraint, but instead the court had decided to step in and was guilty of micromanaging the lower courts. What do you think about that?
Oh my God. And I love that right above it, Neil Gorsuch actually said that the lower courts went much further than needed in putting the entire law on hold. He noted, for example, blocked a provision that barred surgery, even though no party before the court had sought to access the surgery. So,
Oh my gosh.
right. But Fabian, this is just absolutely crazy. And I like that you stopped at affirming for a second there, like gender affirming care, because I remember Dr. Peterson said this really well. He said, if you're going to any psychologist or whatever it is because you have a problem and they're affirming that problem, then like what the hell is that professional, I put quotes on that professional, is actually doing, right?
Yeah.
Fabian, I just want to actually give you some good statistics that that since I heard these statistics, they're like printed in my head. Or like permanent in my head, sorry. But you would think that this is such a controversial issue, the way the media makes it seem like this is a war on the alphabet people, on kids and all that stuff. Actually, no, because more than 70% of people, all people, not a certain party, all people actually support this, what we're seeing, the ban on these hormones and women or men competing in women's sports and stuff like that. The numbers are actually crazy. 62% of Democrats support this, 81% of independents support this, and obviously 97% of Republicans support this. But you got literally about 2/3 of Democrats on board with this.
Wow.
And that's why I think that maybe what we should be doing is that instead of saying, oh, look at these crazy Democrats trying to push this stuff and look at this Democrat administration. No, we should single them out, because if we can win those Democrats just because of this key issue, that landslide is just getting bigger and bigger at the end of the day in November.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100% true what you're saying. And that's why you will rarely hear me say the word Democrat, because that's lumping a lot of people who are not into this stuff with the other people who are into this stuff. So that's why I always make sure I say leftists, or if I'm talking about people like, let's say, Criminally Crenshaw, I'll say neo-Marxist. But I don't like to lump in Democrats, because then they feel alienated. I mean, even the word liberal now, it doesn't really mean what it's supposed to mean. Well, people use it in a way that doesn't really mean what the definition is. So a liberal is just someone who wants, individual liberties and things like that. So that's one thing. But this leftism, that's a whole other thing. That's a far left end of the spectrum, whereas like a liberal and Democrats are more middle of the road. Just like conservatives aren't that crazy, right? They're more in the middle, which is what most people are. So I'm glad that stuff like this is happening. I believe it said 20 states have already banned this stuff, and I'm sure many more are to come. It's shaping up to be like where these states like California and Colorado are just allowing everything to happen, allowing all this stuff to be done, and their states are getting worse and worse and worse. And people notice this stuff. They're like, okay, you guys are the outlier because everyone else is doing things normally, and you're doing the super woke progressive stuff, and your state's going downhill.
The one thing that I'm just curious to know is the official Democrat Party's position is that, did they support this? Because we see things like Transgender Day of Visibility on Easter come out from the Democrat president right now, right? So it just begs the question of whether, I agree with you, I don't want to lump all of Democrats on this, but if we can force them to, this is the hill that you're going to die on, essentially.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
then perhaps they'll start to denounce that in such massive ways, and it'll create such a impact on things that it could really, really shape the political landscape in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, the more they alienate regular, just normal Democratic voters just to pander to the base, the bigger they're going to lose. And, there was a word I wanted to say on Instagram. Actually, I did say it twice. It got me shadow banned. I can't go Instagram live for 6 more days. I was banned for 30. And a friend of mine said, yeah, but is that the hill you want to die on? I said, I wanted to make a point. All right. And anyway, Democrats, if you're watching this, just tell other people, like, we don't support this stuff, man. Like, we're not cool with this. You get called by a pollster. Tell the pollster, no, I'm not cool with this, because it's people like you that are being polled on issues that the left wants you to support. And even being an ally, like a gay ally or whatever, it has no meaning. It's all ceremonial. It's just to get you to say yes and take away your freedom of thought, because now you're an ally of something, which means nothing in in this reality, but in the reality of these people, it means the world to them because it means that it's increasing their base even larger and larger. So speak out against this stuff. Tell that you don't want these bozos doing whatever these bozos are doing. You want some sense of normalcy that we used to have for quite a long time here in this country.
I actually just want to quickly touch up on this whole ally thing because I remember first initially seeing this whole idea of ally on that movie What is a Woman. And then when I start to scroll through TikTok, I finally put the two and two together of what they were massively saying about you have to be an ally. If you're straight, that's fine. You still have to be an ally of the community. And this is actually part of the social contagion because all these people aren't suddenly becoming trans because they're that mentally ill or they feel like they're waking up in the wrong body. It's part of a social contagion that grows obviously from social media where you're being taught that you need to be an ally. And guess what? Just like Chloe Cole, a famous detransitioner, she talks about this nonstop. I hope I'm using the right term, but the fact that she would have never thought about transitioning if it wasn't for this whole idea of become an ally of the community. Because once you become an ally, a couple months later go by, and next thing you know, you're questioning yourself. And then a couple months later, it's affirmed, and then you're doing drastic transitions to yourself. And next thing you know, you're running away from your parents and yada yada yada. The show goes on.
It's a slippery slope. I do want to say that I blame the music industry for something that's for somewhat of what's happening right now because I was listening to music from like the 90s. Actually, I was listening to 70s punk specifically.
That's
Because
awesome.
my uncle, he was an old punker and we're hanging out and he was listening. He was telling me how a lot of these bands, which I've listened to their songs, I just never really listen to them, like Dead Kennedys and things like that. They speak out a lot they speak out against communism and government, right?
Yeah.
There were the rebels. There were the rebels of the 70s and 80s. And even then, in the 90s, you had rock bands, you had Nirvana, you have all these counterculture bands that you had these misfits. There's actually a band called Misfits, people who didn't fit in with a normal thing, and music gave them a way to release that. Well, all of music is so synchronized; it's all the same now. Where you don't have these creative outlets, these unique people who are able to exercise their creative freedom and make money off it because the music industry has taken what it means to be an artist and it's put you in this tiny little box. And if you don't fit in that box, you're not going to get famous. It's the same beats, it's the same music over and over again, the same four chords. And I think we've lost that freedom in musicality to be able to do a good job and, get fame and get money and just, be what you are, but do it in a right way and allow these kids who feel like they don't fit in to be creative and to have an ability to release that emotion, whatever they're going through at that stage in life, with music. And if you don't have music, you have people around you that are going to try to make you get sex changes. So I blame the music industry in part for this.
I do too, honestly, especially because music is such an important factor of pop culture or in general, actually, of society, right? It's a major aspect of it, right? So, like they
Absolutely.
say,
And,
well, I was
once
just going to briefly say that the music has such influence on society that that's going to end up happening.
Yeah, and once you took away live music and people actually playing instruments and you put everything on the computer, that's when you lost a lot of creativity. That's when you lost just people being together and working on something and being able to talk about their struggle. But they use a lot of things that people didn't like, but that's the freedom of speech. Now you can't say anything because you'll get, canceled unless you're a rapper, and that's for now because they're going to come after the rappers as cancel culture because they eat their own. So they're on the chopping block. We already saw what happened to Diddy, but that wasn't about his music. That was because he touched people inappropriately and did a lot more than that. But I don't know how we got on this subject, but listen to the old punk rock albums. And what's interesting is they were the counterculture. They were speaking out against the establishment. And now the rebels are not the punkers, they're the conservatives. Crazy how that works.
We need them back because we need them to lead this counter-revolutionary movement. We need it more than ever. So,
yeah,
and we can fight it on all fronts, right? We're fighting it on the political, you and I. We can fight it on the entertainment side, and it's so important that we fight it on the pop culture, especially on the music side of things. So,
yeah, a decentralization of ideas in music as well. I mean, that's what we need.
That is exactly it,
Yeah.
Fabian.
Awesome. Well, I think we hit our 1 hour mark, so we'll probably wrap things up here. Before we get out of here, I did want to thank our sponsor, Freedom to O, the freedom to think, the freedom to speak, and the freedom to act. Check out freedomtoo.com and use a code Breakaway for 15% off your order. Stay hydrated and stay free with Freedom to O. And make sure you tune in every Monday for the David and Fabian show. So any last words before we get out of here, David?
Just a little quick housekeeping. Like you said, every Monday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. Join us for a nice show. Join us as well on Thursday when we come back for, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. That's Investigations with you and Bree. Super exciting. And then right back that night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. It's the entire home team for a great podcast to end the weekend or end the week for y'all. So we send you off on a good note, but that's about it for me. Thanks for a great night, Fabian, as always.
Yeah, we had a good talk. Great having Seek on. So everyone follow David on Instagram at David_Kate.
Yep.
And follow me at Fabian Lux, LUXE, and follow anywhere Breakaway_USA, because that is where you can find us at. So we will see you guys next time.